Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Okay, this will be, I think the 23rd narration in Sahih Muslim. I say narration because some hadiths have multiple narrations. So we'll go into the next one. It's a totally new narration here. It is narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Yeah, I think this one is translated in this book here. This is the hadith of Wafd Abd al-Qais, the envoy of Abd al-Qais, when they came to visit the Prophet ﷺ and learn from him. Let me see if I can find it here. Anyhow, let me just translate. He says that the envoy and the ambassadors of Abd al-Qais, which is a tribe, they came to Prophet ﷺ and they said to him, O Messenger of Allah, Ya Rasulullah, Inna hadha al-hayya min Rabi'a. They said, we are a part of the tribe from another bigger tribe called Rabi'a. وَقَدْ حَالَتْ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكَ كُفَّارُ مُضَرٍ. And we are not able to come to you because there are some other tribes who are disbelievers in between us and you, in the place called Mudar. This people of Rabi'a or Abd al-Qais, who are part of the tribe from Rabi'a, they lived further east in a place called Bahrain. And the Bahrain of that time is different from Bahrain of today. Bahrain of that time is basically the eastern coast of Arabia, what is now called Al-Ihsa. You know Al-Ihsa? This part used to be called Al-Bahrain. Now Bahrain is only that island. But no, Al-Bahrain at that time was the eastern part of Arabia. That's where they lived. And between them and Hijaz was this place called Mudar. This place called Najd. And Mudar is a tribe that lived in that area. Okay? It says, وَلَا نَخْلُصُ إِلَيْكَ إِلَّا فِي شَهْرِ الْحَرَامِ. And we are not able to come to you except in the sacred months. Shahr al-Haram could mean al-Ashhur al-Haram, all the sacred months, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, wa Rajab. They could only come to you. And this people of Mudar, the tribe of Mudar, especially held the month of Rajab very sacred. And that's why it sometimes used to be called Rajabu Mudar. Rajabu Mudar. So although they were pagans and they were kuffar, non-believers, but they respected those months and they would abstain from fighting or attacking anyone in those months. And the month of Rajab specifically, this tribe of Mudar was respecting. فَمُرْنَا بِأَمْرٍ نَعْمَلُ بِهِ وَنَدْعُ إِلَيْهِ مَنْ وَرَاءَنَا. So please teach us something that we could act by or apply in our lives and call the rest of our tribe to it. قَالَ آمُرُكُمْ بِأَرْبَعٍ وَأَنْهَاكُمْ عَنْ أَرْبَعٍ. He says, I will teach you 4 things and prohibit 4 things. آمركم بالإيمان بالله ثم فسرها لهم فقال in some narrations قال الإيمان بالله وحده أتدرون ما الإيمان بالله وحده. Then he explained. He says, I call you to believe in Allah. Then he explained what belief in Allah is. He says, to testify that there's none worthy of worship except Allah, شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is his messenger. And that is the most comprehensive of basically the basic tenets of Islam, because this includes basically everything that's in the Quran and Sunnah. If you know that Allah is your creator and you don't worship except Allah, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is his messenger, then you would have to accept everything in the Quran and everything in the Sunnah whenever it comes. All the halal is halal, all the haram is haram, all the hudud and the red lines are red lines. So this is a shahada. He says, وَإِقَامِ الصَّلَاةِ, and to perfect your salah, وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ, to give your alms and charity, وَأَن تُؤَدُّوا خُمُسَ مَا غَنِمْتُمْ, and the spoils of war, 1/5 of it goes basically to the Muslim community. It's given to Prophet ﷺ and he disposes it and distributes it to the Muslims according to the need. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ مَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فأن لله خمسه وللرسول ولذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل إن كنتم آمنتم بالله. So Allah says this 1/5 is distributed according to what is mentioned in this verse. And then he says, and I forbid you the following. He says, وَأَنْهَاكُمْ عَنِ الدُّبَّاءِ وَالْحَنْتَمِ وَالنَّقِيرِ وَالْمُقَيَّرِ زاد خلف في روايته شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وعقد واحدة. عقد واحدة يعني when he was teaching them, he was going like this, 1, 2, 3, so that they can remember. Of course, when he says 4 and 4, this is so that people pay attention. What are these 4? And also it helps in case you forget what you were taught, then you know there were 4 things. If you say 3, then you start thinking more and more until you get the 4th one. So that's why you see sometimes in some of the hadith mentioning names, numbers. Like for instance, السبع الكبائر, اتقوا السبع الكبائر, سبع الموبقات. He mentions 7, but the kaba'ir are more than this. But he mentions those numbers so that at least you don't forget the major ones. Okay. Now let me explain this one. أنهاكم عن الدباء. الدباء is basically in Arabic القرع. القرع هو pumpkin. هو القرع القرع. يقطين هو اليقطين. What is in English translation of يقطين? Pumpkin. Something like a pumpkin. They used to place dates or some kind of fruit in it along with water, and it ferments and becomes alcohol. And it had this property that when you put dates or anything, any of those fruits in it, or grapes or whatever, quickly it will become fermented and quickly become alcohol. So he was prohibiting them from using these vessels or containers for their drinks, especially if they're going to place some fruits in those, along with the water in these containers. Now, this is called intibadh. Intibadh is to put these fruits like dates or grapes or whatever in water in a certain container. You're allowed to do that, but here he was prohibiting them from doing it in certain vessels, because in that hot environment, those vessels, when you put these things in them, quickly it becomes alcohol. So he said one of them is this, ad-dubba. The other one is al-naqir. Al-naqir is also, they get a piece of wood, like the trunk of a tree, like a palm tree or something, and they carve it from the inside to make a vessel of it as well. And that also helps. They used to use it for fermenting and for making alcohol as well. So this is all related to alcohol, this prohibition, the different kind of vessels for the same reason. And also al-muqayyar or muzaffat in some other narrations, they used to get also some other vessels and they line it from the inside with al-qar or al-zift. Al-qar or al-zift, yani, how do you translate al-qar or al-zift? Anyhow, it's some kind of lining that will also make it more likely to ferment. They used to put a certain lining on the inside. Al-hantam hiya al-jarra khadra, also some kind of vessel. Anyhow, all these vessels, he was prohibiting them, and he allowed them to use something called as-siqa. As-siqa is a vessel that is made out of animal hide, and it is filled with water or whatever, and you just tie the top, and sometimes they hang it. This way it remains cool, and things do not ferment easily in it. Now, so basically this is just the reading of the hadith, and those people actually were one of the earliest people to embrace Islam, to the extent it is mentioned by Ibn Abbas that the first Jum'ah that was prayed after the Jum'ah of the Masjid of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in Medina was the Jum'ah prayed in Masjid Abdul Qais. Those people in Bahrain, all the way far in the east. After those people went back, they called the rest of the tribe to Islam, and they prayed the first Jum'ah over there after, of course, the Medina. One more thing I was mentioning. Yes, here when he told them to use a siqa, which is made of animal hide, and the narrations will come, I'd like to mention something to you here. They said to him that in our land there's lots of rats, and rats tend to eat those vessels that are made of the animal hide and make holes in them. So and they thought that if they tell him this, that he will give them an excuse to go back to their old vessels. And let me see if this narration is here. Anyhow, he says, no, you're not allowed to use those vessels that I prohibited, even وإن أكلتها الجرذان وإن أكلتها الجرذان, he said it 3 times. Even if the vessels I told you that you can use are to be eaten by rats, or to be, holes are made into it by rats, you just have to replace it. But do not go to these vessels that I prohibited. This prohibition of using these vessels for the sake of not having the fruit to be fermented, or for the sake of avoiding even the touch of alcohol. Scholars say that later on in Islam, when alcohol was known to be totally prohibited and people abstained from it, Prophet ﷺ allowed people to use such vessels as long as they were very careful that nothing ferments. If there's any sign of fermentation, that some of it is becoming alcoholic, then they have to avoid it. So he left it up to their judgment at the end. But early on, the prohibition was extremely strict. So even though they had such a hard time keeping the stuff in regular vessels that he told them to do, and they told them that rats will eat it, he says, still, you have to deal with this matter. And they say that because Arabs were so much loving and used to drinking alcohol and getting drunk, that the only way for this prohibition to be established in them is for them to avoid it strictly, especially at the very beginning. And of course, it's to be avoided altogether. But even here, the prohibition is not even for alcohol. It's prohibition to use any vessel that possibly can lead to fermentation and lead to alcohol formation inadvertently. You follow? So, and actually, this is what they use now in psychology. Like for instance, people who are alcoholics, when they go to a psychologist, how they can abstain from alcohol, how can they treat themselves from alcoholism, they don't tell them take a small drink. No, they tell them nothing, not a single drop. That is the only way you can get out of this problem. Even people who are indulging in unlawful sex or promiscuity, they say the only safe sex is no sex. Did you hear this before? Yeah, probably doctors know this very well. So people who are trying to treat themselves from sexual addiction or any kind of addiction, the only way to treat it is total abstinence. And here it was like this, to get the Arabs to let go of their addiction to alcohol, because they had alcohol all the time. Every home used to make his own alcohol. They were more into alcohol than people in the West are today. And still they managed to get out of it based on the teachings of the Quran and Sunnah. Now, we'll stop here inshallah.